What up? What up? Welcome back to Lockdown Universe, where we talk about everything in the universe. I hope you guys are having a good night, man. Taking care of yourselves, feeling happy, feeling strong, feeling like you can keep on, keeping on. So we're back. We're back. Welcome back. Happy to be back. Hopefully you guys are doing well. Take care of yourselves. Lockdown Universe, home of the bizarre, peculiar, and unheard of stories of UFO legend, paranormal lore, getting let in by the DMB, all along the Watchtower live from Central Park. Let's see, do they have on? They have the time, the date. DMB is awesome because they don't care about you recording them or anything. What year was this from? So that's 5 years ago when it was uploaded, but who knows? Oh yeah, this is back in 2003, man. Woo! Long time ago. I was going to say, Dave does look young here. So, last time we left you off on the social structure of the alien planet with Dolores Cannon and the Keepers of the Garden. I'm always going to try to say Guardians of the Galaxy because Keepers of the Garden is pretty damn close. So I ask you, do you remember last time where Dolores was hypnotizing and regressing Phil 3 lifetimes back into the 4th lifetime where he was an alien entity on a foreign planet? And she was asking him all kinds of questions and learning about that species, and Phil was pretty open with it. Now they're talking about, and I think this is one of the most important things, we're talking about the social structure on that planet. We're talking about the spiritual beliefs of those people. And I just find it fascinating. That's what I'm really interested in, is like social structures on other planets, like how they get along, how do they develop socially with their communities? Did they follow us and our patterns? Is it a universal thing to follow, like a barter system and then a capitalist system, or have some planets gone totally communist from day one? You know, what's the scenario? What's the normal progress pattern in most species, in most planets? Well, in this planet, in this book, Keepers of the Garden, like I said, by Dolores Cannon, she asks him, she says, do you have a government on this planet? And Phil is in hypnotic regression. Keep this in mind. Phil says, not so much a government here, as everyone is pretty much self-regulating. The laws of the land are unwritten and unspoken. It is simply known what to do and what not to do. Therefore, it's not the equivalent of politicians and law enforcement. There is commerce, however. So it sounds like there is some sort of trade or capitalist type mentality here. But you'll see that they're not like us. She asks him, do you have a leader? He says there's no singular leader or nation. Okay, so that's important, right? Because we want to make sure that, do they have a leader? Do they have a president like we do? You know, we want to know. They said not really. They have a global community. There's councils of individuals who set policy. And they're picked by a common vote, a consensus of the population. So they're picked by vote like we do. Wouldn't that be a form of politics, she says? Well, Phil says, not really. The voting is one aspect of politics here on Earth. There is some competition, but there's no political parties. There's no bickering or backbiting or mudslinging. It's a consensus in form, so in respect, there is a difference. See, I think the way that, it would go on a highly developed planet would be a bit better than, 2 politicians slinging mud at each other in a public forum debate, right? So she says, I'm trying to understand this concept. Do they serve for a certain length of time? And he says this varies from person to person. Do you ever have cases of people wanting to remove someone from office or from council? And he says this happens, but pretty infrequently. It was most unusual in nature, but it had occurred. And she says, well, then the council is what rules the planet, right? They're the ones that make the rules and the guides. And he says, well, rules is not an accurate term, but most precisely they would be guides, yes. And she asks him, and this is kind of going into like the legal and the law aspect, like, have you ever had any problems with anyone accepting their guidance, so to speak? And he said disagreements, in other words, but people basically don't want to buck the system. So it would be self-defeating to have a private disagreement. So basically, the heart rules and not the head. The inner planes are much more attuned. Therefore, the common good is expressed much more easily. Do you have any religion on your planet? Well, he says there's no such thing. Religion and politics do not exist. There's no need. Religion and politics were invented for a need, and if there's no need, there's no device. Well, do you have a belief in a God or a creator? Well, certainly. It's more than a belief, it's a knowing. It's an awareness and a consciousness. However, it bears little resemblance to what we call religion here on Earth. Religion is more of a political entity. For the most part, on this planet Earth at the time, that's its political entity right now. The association with a supreme being or creator knowledge is what seems to elevate religion to this lofty position here on Earth, but it's no more relevant than being a Democrat or Republican, you see. So, are there any schools on your planet? Certainly. We have groups of those who wish to learn in all different age groups, and they learn many different things. There's no segregation according to age. That's what I like to hear. There's no, those with common interests are grouped together and taught. See, that's what we need here from day one. If they got a kid that's interested in becoming a vet, let them learn how to be a vet. Do they need how to learn how to do freaking geometry? No, man. Well, I mean, I don't think so for being a vet. You need to learn biological sciences. Somebody wants to be a pumpkin farmer, let them be a pumpkin farmer. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. Maybe I'm just crazy. So, these people, these teachers, may come from other planets or systems and are qualified to teach. So that's really cool. They actually have teachers from other planets and systems that come to their planet to teach them about what they want to become. I mean, that's really interesting. There are many different areas that are taught, such as alien cultures, damn, histories, damn, manufacturing processes, and different sciences, damn. Wouldn't that be awesome if we got taught in alien histories and alien sciences and manufacturing processes? I mean, like, oh my God, it would be so cool. Is education compulsory like it is here on planet Earth? Well, he says it's totally an alien concept because everyone naturally wants to learn. This is their personal evolution is important to them. It doesn't need to be a mandatory situation. Everyone wishes to learn because that's their growth, as surely as physical growth. Education is eagerly asked for and given because it's a different outlook on education. Education here on Earth is not looked at equally. Here on Earth, someone might choose to become a cast out of society or one that cannot relate to people. And this is strictly just an analogy. But there's an inherent natural drive on this planet and on that planet that is in the same situation. So he's saying everybody wants to learn. Everybody wants to grow. That's why we came to Earth in the first place. He said those who, through no fault of their own, who have defective minds biologically or psychologically, you might say, the drive is not evident in these folks, and so due to no fault of their own, they take care of those people. So it's dependent upon social selective breeding. So these guys, what they do is they selectively breed to rid the population of unfortunate specimens, like folks that might have, a disease or a handicap or something like that. They selectively breed that out, just like we breed dogs and cats and other animals. We breed them to have, hopefully, better lives and better qualities and characteristics, so they can live longer, be stronger, and just have a better life. So they continue here and they say, is this a planet of perfect people? Do you have the equivalent of policemen or anyone to enforce laws? And he says, no, there's no equivalent because everyone is self-enforcing. That's interesting. Self-enforced. Could you imagine if everybody was like self-enforcing here too? I mean, like, I think a lot of people are, but I think there's a lot of people that, they just don't care. So he says there's no equivalent, there's no need for armies or police. A military or a law enforcement atmosphere is simply not necessary when everyone is self-policing. So they're policing themselves. Do you have a problem with negative types of people? Well, he said there's occasionally inferior people, and there are occasionally times where someone who is functioning quite well will become not necessarily not functioning, but ill functioning, and mental illness would be the equivalent here. There are those who, because of their circumstances, simply self-destruct or lead themselves to experiences where they become ill functioning. So she asks him where they might, do you mean they might actually hurt someone else? And he says, not so much themselves, but, I mean, not so much others, but they might hurt themselves. They are helped as much as they can be, given all the love they can accept, in order for them to undertake their mistake, and then they are helped to a recovery. So you don't have anything like prisons or jails on that planet? He says, no. The equivalent would be hospitals, like mental health hospitals, it sounds like, right? These people, these poor unfortunates, are hospitalized and given special attention. There's no punishment. However, there is not a willful wrongdoing here. It's simply a misunderstanding. So she asks him, do you have cases of willful wrongdoing? Which I think he already answered. He says this is so rare and infrequent, it's basically non-existent. So we have simply evolved past that. It's an evolutionary concept. Are there any other races? Now this is where it gets kind of interesting, because they kind of have like this weird kind of like slave race, but they don't call it a slave race. So what he says is that she asks him, are there other races? He says there is a class of creatures which are inferior, which are used benignly for tasks or menial labor. They are not really inferior. They are not looked down upon. They are not considered lesser, but they are simply considered less developed. They have an inferior mental capability, but they're useful. They're miners of the metal that we use. They use a lot of like aluminum and things like that. They are servant, quote unquote, but they are cared for. So they're servants, but they're cared for and looked after. They are a race which was indigenous to the planet before the arrival of the superior race, and were integrated into the uplifting of the planetary consciousness. They are bestial in appearance, covered with hair, smaller in stature, and somewhat stoop-shouldered. So they kind of like, they remind me of like Cousin It from the Addams Family. The little people, as we affectionately call them, are loved and cared for as brethren. What kind of tasks would they do, and are they used for? And he says, well, they're not so much used. It's hard to translate because there's no concept here of what to translate it to. He said the closest available translation would come out of slavery, but this is not at all accurate because it's total integration, not segregation. They know their place, we know their place, and there is acceptance. There is harmony, which there is so little of here on Earth. Wow, that sounds like what a superior race might say when they come to take somebody over. Oh, they like it. They're happy with it. They understand it. They know their place, and they're accepting of it. I mean, maybe it's true, but it just sounds a little too good to be true. He says they take their station with much dignity. The occasional malfunction, or as we might say, breakdown of these creatures is not intentional. They do get sick. This is not intentional, though, as it does cause hardship. The intent here is what's important, but there's not lack of intent. There is only striving to serve. Because of their bestial nature, they're overworked. If they're overworked or prodded, they have the ability to become violent, so we have to tend to them kind of carefully. So that's good. He says that, it's rare that this would happen. For the most part, the race has cleaned up its act, so to speak. Do you guys have any weapons of any sort? She asked, and this is a good question, right? Because you got to imagine they have some sort of defenses, right? I mean, they are a planet that has other species come into that planet. You want to have some defenses. And he says there's no such things as weapons for person-to-person combat, but there are reptiles in the woods which are of enormous proportions, almost 30 feet tall, similar to dinosaurs on this planet. If one is in the wild, if one of their people was in the wild, they would need protection from these 30 feet tall reptiles. And under certain circumstances, if someone is disturbing their nest, they will attack in defense of their young. but they can be repulsed by electric charges. This story is kind of what makes me think that this part of the story is what makes me think this story is true. Because, while he could have made up that other stuff, I mean, just randomly answering, do you have weapons? And just that simple question, do you guys have weapons of any sort? And he says nothing for hand-to-hand combat, but we do have some for 30-foot fucking tall reptiles. I mean, nobody's like coming up with that shit off their head, man. I mean, that's like, they would have had to really thought about that ahead of time, and you could tell if they were making it up because they'd be like stuttering and all that shit. So that it seems like it must be legit. He says that these electric charges can be used from the stunning device that we have that is round and tubular with a control on the end of it. It's carried by a shaft, so it's kind of like one of those weapons that Teal'c from Stargate has, where he kind of holds it and can shoot out stuff, except it can't shoot. It's kind of like a stunner, so to speak. But it probably looks similar to what Teal'c had. So he says it's carried by the shaft, and the end is pushed onto the body of the animal, and the particular device is for protection, and it's a defensive weapon, not an offensive weapon. It would not kill the animal, but repulse it. They learn quickly not to mess with the rod, and they learn that they would not care to be any closer after they had been stunned. After being that close to something that generates that much pain, the animal immediately turns the other direction. But not all the creatures are that huge. Most are not much taller than the people that are using the rod. These live in dense, unpopulated areas away from the cities. Most are reptilian in nature, but not all. There are furried, or hair-covered creatures as well, and these rods work well on fur or reptile. Interesting. Can you imagine a planet where you really don't need a weapon for your own, against your own people? You just need a weapon for 30-foot tall reptiles. Well, she said, but would you ever have to kill anything? Well, they're vegetarians, so they don't have to kill anything necessarily unless it's attacking them, right? He said, we could reach that point. If it did, it would be done, but we always try to repulse the creature. These charges do not have enough power to kill. There is the equivalent of guns, though they have. These are weapons that use the same types of things as bullets. It would only be used if need be. But he doesn't say what it would be needed for. An alien force trying to take over your planet? Maybe, right? It doesn't sound like they want to kill anything. I wonder if they have some sort of karmic law that basically says you shouldn't do that and you're going to get karma if you do. I don't know, but she asks him, do you have any wild animals? Well, yeah, just those reptilian ones and the rest of them, but they're mostly vegetarian in nature. They're on the plains on the planet, which have furry creatures. There's also the equivalent of fish that live in the water, and those creatures which live in the air. And she asks him about like domesticated animals, which of course are near and dear to my heart. We've got dogs and cats. There are pets for the most part. There are horses or the equivalent, which can be used to draw or pull. These are the only kind that are used. There's also domesticated animals similar to monkeys. That there are some that would appear as very strange creatures if they were here on Earth, which would terrify a youngster, but they're quite harmless and lovable too. I wonder if they have an animal like that red-eyed devil that was in Varginha, Brazil, in 1997. There are similarities to some of the animals that are here on Earth, the differences in characteristics from animals I've experienced, but I have not experienced all the animals on Earth, so I cannot say for sure or for certain. But from the ones I've seen here, there are not equivalents to some of those that are on my home planet. There are some that are similar, like a horse. The cow has not really any real equivalent on my planet. She says, then you wouldn't use milk or anything like that from animals, question mark. There are animals which give milk, but this is not consumed. Interesting. Were these creatures on the planet whenever it was first colonized? Some were, and some were brought from other systems. There is much here. We have cities, we have country, we have waterfalls, birds, trees, and picnics. We don't have cars and pollution or billboards. These are manifestations of Earth culture at this time, which is simply non-existent in that place. What kind of transportation do you have, though? Dolores asked, which is a good question. You got to transport yourself around, and they had to develop that. He said there are vehicles which travel along roads on their own, vehicles that fly through the air, and there are vehicles which travel on water. Well, what kind of power do they use? And this is what makes me think this story is true again. The vehicles which fly through the air oftentimes use crystals for their propulsion. They also use hovercraft which work on magnetism. The crystals thing is super important because David Adair, who is bar none one of the most honest people that has given us his whistleblower testimony from back in the 70s, said he saw crystals on a alien engine, and that's how they were powered. They were powered by crystals. I grew up, back when kids were into crystals, and they said they had power and all this stuff, and I was like, you guys are crazy, man. Those are just rocks. But crystals really do have a power. They have a resonance to them that resonates on certain frequencies, and they can resonate those frequencies into things and then give them power. So that's what I really think is interesting, is that we really haven't, in our society, in our known society, in our known commerce, we haven't utilized or are not using crystal power. He says they also use hovercraft, which work on magnetism. The shells are made with an aluminum type of material. There are small vehicles which would glide on energy currents or pathways. That's interesting. They can glide on energy currents. See, it's fucking crazy. These pathways being set up much like highways on the planet at this time. Do you mean something like electric currents? She says. He said, yeah, that'd be a rough analogy. She says they couldn't go off of them, and he says that's correct, for there is an ability to travel independently of these. However, it's most efficient to use these paths as they do not require an external energy source, as it would require an external energy source to travel off the path. So if they just go with the flow, they're fine, but they'd have to use another type of energy source, like a storage cell that we have here on Earth, similar to like what we have here on Earth, to go off of like these highways. She asks him about seasons and whether or not these seasons that occur on the planet here would occur on their planet. This is interesting because he says they don't. He says they have a gradual change over a period of years of the climate owing to the large orbit around the sun. So that's interesting. So it sounds like they have a pretty moderate condition for years, and then it kind of gradually changes as they large orbit around the sun. He says it's described by this planet Earth as the seasons are much less dramatic on their planet. They're much less extreme. It tends to go from warm to hot, or like August, early summer to August, and then back to early summer. So they really don't have winters. They don't get winters at all. He says the Earth gets winters because of the tilting of the axis. Much as your moon never shows its dark side to the Earth, this planet never tilts its axis, so it's unable to change the seasons. It's always pleasant or hot. To equate to this experience, it would remain warm or pleasant, and then hot or very warm. This is simply a translation for it's not perceived as uncomfortable on the planet. This is interesting to me because I live in an area where we have all four seasons. I don't like it being super hot. I like it being cool. Not necessarily cold, but cool. So I like spring. I like fall. I'm not a huge fan of summer. It's too damn hot to really do anything. So I like the winters as well because it's cool enough to go places, but it's not always snowy, so you can drive around in it. I couldn't imagine being on a planet where it's just like warm and hot. I like the cool. She asked him about like insects and rain and things like that. Well, their gravity is 1/6 of what it is here on Earth. He says on their planet they have much more like fog with large drops if there's an extreme case of humidity, but they don't really have rain like we do here. He says this occurs when the certain shifts of the wind happen, but the weather is much more stable than it is here on Earth. It does ruin a picnic, though. He says, we have fun, we have vacations, and we have birds to contend with, and ants and insects and things like that. She says, do you have days and nights? Are they caused by the rotation of the planet? He says, the answer is no. There is no change in day on that part of the planet. I have a feeling of almost sadness that we don't. One part is forever twilight and one part is not. This is because the planet's evolution, you see, it's not quite as traumatic as Earth's evolution. So we have like places like in Alaska that it's daylight at 10:30, midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. I just watched some videos of people being up there on like TikTok and Facebook and stuff like that, and they're like, oh my God, look at this, it's 10:30 at night and it's like the sun's out. He's like, how am I going to sleep? And you got to pull the shades closed, you know? So there's other planets out there that are way different in their circulation around the solar system than us. So that's interesting to think about too. And then their planet has 1/6 the gravity. That's wild, because you would think that would extend the body out quite a bit, because you don't have as much weighing us down, man. You know, like I'm kind of a heavier guy, and it's like, oh man, I could use 1/6 of gravity at this point, man. That'd be nice. So I'm gonna end it there. There's a lot of alien information in this, and it gets kind of deep. So I don't want to get too deep tonight. We've already at 26 minutes, so I'm gonna leave it there. What'd you think about this? This is interesting, right? We've never really heard of an alien whistleblower from another time period or lifespan. We only have who we're living with currently. This is a whistleblower from many hundreds of years ago, maybe even millennia ago. We don't even know what's going on that planet anymore. So, interesting stuff to talk about. A lot to come in the future. I'll continue to do different podcasts in between, and we'll keep revisiting this as we go along. So I hope you guys have a great night. Take care of yourselves physically, spiritually, emotionally. Follow through on your hobbies and your goals and your dreams, and think to yourself, would you be willing to undergo hypnotic regression to find out if you lived an alien life? Wouldn't that be fascinating? I would love to see if I ever lived on a planet far, far away, or on a starship, or came from one planet to another to allow our species to survive. That'd be fascinating to find out. So we're going to find out more about this species and others as she dives into other individuals who have also had similar experiences in past lives. So take care of yourselves. Until next time, guys, take care. Lockdown Universe out. Peace. Go like, follow, share, subscribe. Out.